Hook 1. Have you ever wondered why the smartest person in the room often says the least? Hook 2. What if true intelligence wasn't about knowing all the answers, but knowing when to stay silent? Hook 3. Today, we reveal 7 phrases that wise men never say, because some words don't just reveal who you are, they quietly destroy what you've built. Welcome to Stoic Banlance. I'm really glad you're here, because today's lesson might just shift the way you see yourself, and more importantly, how others perceive you. Here's the truth, the most intelligent men I've ever met share one powerful habit. It's not about having an answer for everything, or being able to name every capital city on the planet. No, their strength lies in restraint. In silence. In knowing that sometimes, what you don't say says far more than what you do. Over the years, I've studied people, through ancient Stoic philosophy and countless hours in coffee shops, quietly watching human nature unfold. And one lesson stands out: the wisest men. They don't waste words. They're not afraid of silence. And they never utter phrases that slowly eat away at their own credibility. Today, we're going to dive into 7 things intelligent men simply do not say. Not because they're perfect, but because experience, often earned the hard way, has taught them these words lead nowhere good. If that sounds like the kind of wisdom you're after, stick around. Hit that subscribe button. And let's get wiser, together. 1. I already know that. It sounds harmless, doesn't it? Even confident. But behind that phrase hides something far less admirable: a closed mind. And a truly intelligent man knows better. I learned this lesson the hard way. Years ago, I was working with a mentor, an older man, calm and precise, who carried the quiet authority of someone who had weathered many storms. We were reviewing a process I'd done countless times before. He began to explain, and without thinking, I cut him off. Yeah, I know that already. He looked at me, not angry, but heavy, and said nothing. Later that night, it hit me: I hadn't just interrupted him. I had cut off my own chance to learn something new. I had mistaken repetition for mastery. His experience, the kind you don't find in training videos or manuals, was something I had just thrown away. You see, when we say, "I already know that," what we're really saying is, "I have nothing left to learn." That's not intelligence. That's arrogance dressed up as confidence. Sometimes, the biggest wall between us and what we want, is not the challenge itself, but the story we tell ourselves about it. And as we saw with Robert, that story often begins with 2 paralyzing words: "That's impossible." Let's pick up from there. He wasn't just dismissing ideas, he was projecting his own fears. Fear of failure. Fear of the unknown. Fear of being wrong. But it wasn't loud or obvious. No, this fear came dressed in more acceptable clothing: logic, caution, practicality. That's what makes it dangerous. It doesn't announce itself as fear. It hides behind rational arguments and spreadsheets. But underneath that disguise is a subtle, suffocating belief: if I can't see the whole path, I won't even take the first step. Stoic philosophy tears this illusion apart. It reminds us that the real problem isn't the obstacle, it's how we perceive the obstacle. That's what defeats us. I witnessed this truth in action during a major project I joined years after working with Robert. The budget was tight. The deadline felt like a cruel joke. The team was young and green. Every part of me wanted to say, "This just isn't going to work." But instead, I paused and asked myself, what's one small thing I can control today? What's the next step? No grand strategy. No heroics. Just the next step. And you know what? That project became one of the most successful experiences of my career, not because we performed miracles, but because we refused to be frozen by fear. We stayed in motion. One step at a time. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." That mindset became our compass. Because when a man says, "That's impossible," he's not describing the task, he's declaring defeat before the battle even begins. Intelligent men see it differently. They know what often feels impossible is really just unfamiliar. It's not a dead end. It's a doorway. It's not a wall, it's a challenge asking you to knock, or even better, to break through. They've learned that true strength isn't proven by breezing through easy wins. It's built in the hard places, in showing up again and again, even when success seems unlikely. That's Stoic courage. Not blind optimism. Not fantasy. But disciplined, grounded persistence. And here's the real cost of saying, "That's impossible." When we label something that way, we don't just shut out a possibility, we shut ourselves out. We deny ourselves the chance to grow, to lead, to surprise even ourselves. But the man who learns to move forward, even one small step at a time, opens doors no one else sees. That's not just intelligence. That's wisdom forged in the fire of effort. 3. That's not my fault. Of all the phrases that quietly damage a man's character, this might be the most tempting, and the most dangerous. That's not my fault. Simple. Defensible. And, in the moment, it feels entirely fair. When something falls apart, at work, in a relationship, in life, our first instinct is often to protect ourselves. To make it clear, someone else dropped the ball. But here's the catch, every time we push away responsibility, we also give away our power. Intelligent men understand this at a deep level. They've learned that responsibility isn't about taking the blame, it's about taking ownership. It's not about guilt. It's about influence. Because the moment you say, "That's not my fault," you remove yourself from the equation. You hand over the key to change, and wait for someone else to fix what's broken. I remember this vividly from a situation years ago. My friend Michael lost a major client, one that had been with his company for years. And almost instantly, he began listing the reasons why it wasn't his fault. The client was hard to deal with, the market had shifted, his team dropped the ball. All of which were partly true. But while he was defending himself, he missed the real opportunity, to reflect, to grow, and to lead. You see, by refusing to take any responsibility, he also refused any power to improve the outcome. He stayed stuck. Making the same mistakes. Telling the same story. What he didn't realize was this: when you claim even the smallest piece of responsibility, you reclaim the ability to influence what happens next. The Stoics knew this well. Epictetus said, "It is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." That's the shift. From passive to active. From victim to leader. In my own life, I've seen this again and again. When I admit, even quietly to myself, that I could have communicated better, prepared more, listened closer, something powerful happens. A door opens. New insights emerge. Trust builds, not just from others, but within myself. Because when a man owns his role, no matter how small, he stops waiting to be rescued. He starts moving forward. Blame is easy. Responsibility is hard. But it's also where real strength lives. And the Stoics remind us, we weren't born to escape difficulty, we were built to rise above it. And that rise always begins with a simple but powerful question. What can I do differently next time? That's how intelligent men lead. Not by pointing fingers, but by pointing the way. And speaking of strength, what if the very thing we think proves it, our independence, is sometimes what quietly weakens us? Let's talk about the fourth phrase intelligent men never say. Stoicism cuts through that illusion sharply. Marcus Aurelius said it best, "You cannot learn anything when you think you already know everything." That's your ego talking, trying to protect your image at the cost of your growth. Intelligent men know that knowledge isn't a trophy to display, it's a river, flowing, shifting. Step into it twice, and it's never quite the same. I once watched a veteran carpenter patiently listen to a young apprentice explain a technique the older man had likely mastered decades ago. He nodded, asked questions, even thanked him. Later, I asked why. He smiled and said, because sometimes, you learn something not in the content, but in how someone else sees it. That's wisdom. That's humility. And that's a kind of intelligence that doesn't need to show off. So next time you catch yourself thinking, I've heard this before, pause. Listen. Not to flatter the speaker, but because you might just catch a detail, a new angle, a deeper insight. And even if you don't, you practice humility. You honor the conversation. And over time, that makes you the kind of person others want to listen to. The Stoics called this mastery of the self, the strength to remain a student for life. And that's the kind of intelligence that never fades. 2. That's impossible. Let me tell you a story. A few years back, I worked alongside a man named Robert. Sharp. Experienced. A quiet powerhouse in the company. He had a calm that made you feel like everything was under control. But there was one thing he said over and over, almost reflexively. That's impossible. Whenever a new idea came up, whether it was entering a fresh market, upgrading an old system, or handling a difficult client, his answer was the same. 2 words. Just 2. But they carried the weight of a locked door. At first, it felt like he was being realistic. Practical. Why chase pipe dreams, right? But over time, it became clear, it wasn't the idea he was shutting down. It was himself. His own limits. His own fear. Seneca, one of the great Stoics, said it perfectly, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. And that's exactly what Robert was doing. He wasn't judging the ideas. He was projecting his own fear onto them. Sometimes, pride wears a strong face. But as we saw, true strength often lies not in standing alone, but in knowing when to ask for help. Let's explore that even further. During the darkest hours of the American Civil War, Abraham Lincoln stood as a towering figure of resolve, stoic, burdened, carrying the fractured soul of a nation on his weary shoulders. History often paints him as a lone warrior, a man who bore it all in silence. But what many overlook is just how deeply Lincoln leaned on others. He built his circle carefully, surrounding himself with advisors who didn't just echo his views, they challenged them. He didn't fear contradiction. He welcomed it. Why? Because he understood a truth many never learn, wisdom doesn't grow in isolation. It is shaped, sharpened, through the humility of saying, I don't have all the answers. Even during the fierce and bloody conflict at Antietam, Lincoln didn't retreat into pride. He made the deliberate choice to visit General McClellan, despite their disagreements. He sought insight, not comfort. He sat for countless hours with his cabinet, famously known as the team of rivals, because he saw value in perspectives different from his own, even if they clashed with his instincts. That wasn't weakness. That was strength, measured not by control, but by humility. It's a lesson that intelligent men come to learn, often through struggle. Self-reliance is essential, but it was never meant to be absolute. Even the Stoics agreed. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful emperors in history, didn't pretend to have it all figured out. In Meditations, he openly honored the people who shaped his thinking, mentors, teachers, friends. He recognized their wisdom as part of his own. So if a man like Marcus Aurelius, leader of an empire, could admit his need for others, why do we still struggle to do the same? Often, we tell ourselves that asking for help is an admission of weakness. That if we reach out, it's because we've failed to be strong enough. But that belief? It's a trap. A quiet one. It keeps us stuck in our own heads, drowning slowly in problems we were never meant to carry alone. Worse still, it cuts off something beautiful. When we don't ask for help, we rob others of the chance to give it. We block the flow of connection that holds people together. I know this, because I've been there. For a long time, I believed I had to carry everything, work, family, expectations, like some badge of honor. I thought keeping it all together meant keeping it to myself. But it didn't make me stronger. It just wore me down. The turning point came not in some dramatic breakdown, but in a quiet conversation, when I finally told someone I trusted, I can't do this alone. And what I received in return wasn't judgment. It was understanding. Support. Relief. That small act of humility gave me something I hadn't felt in years: clarity. Energy. Hope. I realized something simple, yet life-changing: real strength isn't about how long you can stand alone. It's knowing when to reach out, and when to receive. The Stoics were clear on this. We are not islands. We are part of a larger whole, built for cooperation, for mutual aid. Epictetus said it best: no man is an island. Pretending we don't need each other isn't noble. It's unnatural. And ultimately, unnecessary. Because asking for help doesn't weaken your strength, it defines it. It shows courage. It shows honesty. And those two qualities, they are the foundation of a wise, intelligent man. So next time you're tempted to say, "I've got this. I don't need anyone," pause. Ask yourself, is that true strength speaking? Or is it pride, hiding behind the mask of independence? And remember Lincoln, not just as the man who stood tall, but as the man who knew when to lean on others to rise even taller. 5. I'm too old for that. Here's another lie that slips out quietly, often wrapped in a chuckle, or disguised as realism: I'm too old for that. It sounds harmless. A passing thought. Maybe even self-aware. But underneath? It's heavy. It's a quiet surrender. A belief that the best pages are already written. That your story is nearing its final chapter, and there's not much left worth writing. Intelligent men know this phrase isn't just limiting. It's toxic. It doesn't just close doors, it locks them shut. I once read about a man named Harry Bernstein. He spent his life working as a magazine editor, raising a family, living a quiet, ordinary life. Then, at 93 years old, Harry decided to write his very first book. It was called The Invisible Wall, a memoir about his childhood in a small English town, divided by religion and prejudice. He submitted it to publishers. And was rejected again and again. But he didn't stop. At 96, that book was finally published. It went on to earn international acclaim, translated into multiple languages, touching hearts across the globe. And he didn't stop there. Harry wrote 3 more books after that. What moved me most about Harry's story wasn't the success. It was the courage. The courage to believe that even at 93, his life still had meaning. That his voice still mattered. That he still had something to give. That courage. It's not rare. It's a choice. One we all face, often silently. Do we listen to the voice that says we've missed our moment? Or do we embrace the truth that, as long as we're breathing, we still have purpose? The Stoics never saw age as a reason to stop. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself of mortality, not to give in to it, but to stay present in the time he still had. He believed that growth doesn't end with age, it deepens. It ripens. I've seen men in their 60s start new businesses. I've seen others mentor the next generation, share wisdom, and build legacies. But I've also seen people retreat, convinced they've outlived their relevance. The difference? It wasn't in years. It was in mindset. The man who says, "I'm too old for that," has already closed the door. But the one who asks, "What can I do now?" he opens it wide again. Age doesn't disqualify us from living fully. It equips us. With clarity. With resilience. With something younger men haven't yet earned: perspective. That's the Stoic path. Not just to live long, but to live meaningfully. To keep striving, learning, creating, until the very end. Because as long as we are here, there is still work to do. If that inspired something in you, give this video a like, and make sure you're subscribed. Because I'll keep sharing every insight I find, and I want you to be the first to hear it. Now, let's tackle the next phrase, the one that sounds reasonable but quietly steals your future. Let's talk about "I'll do it later." In the last part, we looked at how age isn't the enemy of growth, it's often the soil where the richest wisdom blooms. But there's another quiet thief of our potential, one that disguises itself as logic and leaves no trace. Let's talk about it. 6. I'll do it later. It sounds harmless, doesn't it? Rational. Even responsible. Like a quiet promise we make to ourselves. But here's the brutal truth, later is the graveyard where most of our best intentions are quietly buried. Wise men know this. Many learned it the hard way. Because delaying what matters doesn't buy you more time, it steals it. Every time we say, "I'll call tomorrow, I'll apologize next week, I'll start when things calm down," we're placing a bet, using a currency we don't actually control, time. I once knew a man named Thomas. By every measure, he was successful, a thriving business, a loving family, respect in his community. But Thomas was always busy. Too busy. He told himself that one day, when the meetings slowed down or the numbers hit the right mark, he'd make more time for his aging father. He kept pushing back the fishing trip they had planned. Skipped the calls. Delayed the visits. Until one day, later was gone. His father passed away suddenly. No goodbye. No one last moment. Thomas once shared this story with me, not for sympathy, but as a warning. He said his phone was full of half-written messages he never sent. His heart. Full of words he never said. We think we have time, until we don't. The Stoics didn't dance around this reality. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, daily, of his own mortality. Not to be morbid, but to awaken urgency. He wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." That wasn't a poetic musing. It was a daily practice. A mindset. One that intelligent men adopt, because they understand something most people avoid. Time doesn't wait for us to be ready. It doesn't care about our best intentions. What we delay today, we may never get to do tomorrow. That's why wise men act now. They make the call they've been avoiding. They start the hard conversation. They begin that dusty project sitting in the back of their mind, waiting for the right time that never comes. I've felt this in my own life, letters I never wrote, conversations I avoided, moments I thought would wait for me. But when I finally stopped stalling and took action, something shifted. The weight lifted. Regret turned into clarity. I realized that it's action, not intention, that shapes the story of our lives. The Stoics urge us, live now. Fully. With urgency. Because, later, is the softest lie we tell ourselves. It soothes us, until it betrays us. The man who acts today, who refuses to leave what matters undone, lives without regret. And that is real wisdom. Because opportunity doesn't always knock twice. Sometimes, it just slips away quietly, while we're busy waiting for a better moment. 7. That's just how I am. And now we arrive at the final phrase, perhaps the most quietly dangerous of them all. That's just how I am. It sounds like certainty. Like someone who knows themselves. But in truth, it's often a full stop, a quiet surrender. A way of saying, I'm done growing. Intelligent men steer clear of this mindset. Because they understand something many overlook, we are not fixed beings. We are not cemented into who we were. We are shaped, moment by moment, by what we choose to do, think, and say, over and over again. The moment a man declares, I can't change, what he's really saying is, I won't try. I've seen this firsthand, more times than I can count. A man who constantly loses his temper shrugs and says, "That's just how I am." Another, afraid of emotional connection, insists, "That's who I've always been." These aren't facts. They're excuses. They allow fear, discomfort, and habit to hide behind the mask of authenticity. But underneath? It's resistance. Resistance to discomfort. Resistance to the work of growth. Resistance to the reality that none of us are finished becoming who we're meant to be. The Stoics tackled this head-on. They didn't believe we're prisoners of our past or temperament. Epictetus said, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." Likewise, it's not your nature that limits you, it's the story you keep telling yourself about who you are. Change is hard. It's uncomfortable. It asks us to examine ourselves, to face the parts we'd rather leave unchallenged. But the Stoics also taught that self-mastery is the highest calling. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Growth demands that we ask, am I really this way? Or is it just easier than becoming better? Intelligent men choose the harder road. Not out of shame, but out of respect, for who they are, and who they're still becoming. In the end, that's just how I am, isn't identity. It's inertia. It closes the door on possibility. But life is constant change. Nature is change. And to resist that is to resist being alive. The man who understands this sees himself as unfinished, but willing. And in that willingness lies true strength. If you've caught yourself saying one of these 7 things, trust me, you're not alone. I've said them, too. More times than I'd like to admit. But that's not what defines us. What defines an intelligent man isn't the absence of mistakes, it's the courage to recognize them, and to choose something better. And that's exactly what we're doing here, one thoughtful step at a time. So let me ask you, which one of these hit home for you today? Is it time to leave, "That's just how I am," behind? Or finally retire, "I'll do it later," before later turns into never? Whatever it is, this moment is your invitation to take that next step. Because wisdom isn't about being perfect. It's about staying curious. Staying humble. And always moving forward. If something in today's conversation lit a spark in you, pass it on. Share this video with someone walking the same path. And if you haven't yet, subscribe. Because the next time I uncover another insight on how to live better, I want you to be the first to hear it. Until next time, stay strong, stay present, and never stop becoming.